The air crackled with anticipation. A storm was brewing. Inside a Manhattan courtroom, history was being made. The jury had reached a verdict in the case against former President Donald J. Trump, a man who had never been one for losing gracefully. The world held its breath. The weight of the moment was palpable. The world watched, captivated, as the jury foreman, his face etched with solemnity, read out the verdict, guilty. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The silence was deafening, broken only by the click of cameras capturing the unprecedented scene. For a man who had always seemed invincible, the walls were closing in. Trump, never one to shy away from a fight, reacted with his trademark fury. His face, usually a mask of bravado, contorted with rage. The verdict, he declared, was a politically motivated witch hunt, a blatant attempt to silence him and his supporters. His words, laced with venom and defiance, echoed through the courtroom, a stark reminder of the deep divisions that plagued the nation. The question now was, how would America move forward from this moment of reckoning? The guilty verdict sent shockwaves across the nation and beyond. For the first time in American history, a former president had been found guilty of a crime. The charges, stemming from, were serious and carried significant legal ramifications. The prosecution had presented a compelling case, meticulously laying out their arguments and presenting evidence that they believed proved Trump's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense, in turn, argued that Trump was a victim of political persecution, a pawn in a larger game orchestrated by his enemies to discredit him and destroy his legacy. The jury, however, remained unconvinced by the defense's arguments. News of the verdict spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and social media feeds around the world. The world watched, captivated, as the drama unfolded, wondering what this meant for the future of American democracy. Trump's response was explosive. From his Mar-a-Lago estate, he unleashed a tirade of fury, his words dripping with anger and resentment. The verdict, he railed, was a travesty of justice, a politically motivated attack orchestrated by his enemies to silence him and his supporters. His voice, hoarse with rage, boomed through the microphones, his words carried live on every news channel. He lashed out at the judge, the jury, the prosecutors, and anyone else he deemed responsible for his predicament. His words were inflammatory, designed to incite anger and sow further division within the already fractured nation. This was not the measured response of a statesman accepting defeat. It was the desperate roar of a wounded animal, backed into a corner and lashing out in every direction. He would appeal the verdict, he declared, and he would be vindicated. His words, laced with defiance, resonated with his loyal base, who saw him as a martyr, a victim of a corrupt system determined to silence their champion. Outside the courthouse, a scene of stark contrasts unfolded. The nation, deeply divided, mirrored the chasm between Trump and his accusers. On one side, a sea of protesters, their faces contorted with anger, waved pro-Trump flags and chanted slogans denouncing the verdict. Their voices, hoarse from shouting, rose in a chorus of defiance. They believed, with unwavering conviction, that their hero had been wronged, that the verdict was a sham, a politically motivated attack on a man who dared to challenge the status quo. For them, this was not just about Trump, it was about their beliefs, their values, their very way of life, which they felt were under attack. On the other side, a smaller but equally passionate group celebrated. They held signs proclaiming justice has been served and no one is above the law. The scene outside the courthouse was a microcosm of the nation itself, a nation riven by political polarization, distrust, and animosity. The verdict, rather than uniting the country, seemed to have driven the wedge even deeper, pushing the two sides further apart. The guilty verdict sent shockwaves through the legal and political landscape. Legal experts weighed in, dissecting the verdict and its potential implications. Some argued that the verdict set a dangerous precedent, potentially opening the door for politically motivated prosecutions in the future. Others hailed it as a victory for the rule of law, a sign that no one, not even a former president, was above the law. Politically, the verdict threw the already turbulent waters into further turmoil. Democrats, emboldened by the verdict, called for Trump to be held accountable for his actions. Some even went so far as to suggest that he should be barred from holding public office in the future. Republicans, on the other hand, found themselves in a difficult position. Some, though wary of alienating Trump's loyal base, acknowledged the seriousness of the charges and called for a period of reflection and introspection. The guilty verdict hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the events of January 6th, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol in a desperate attempt to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's election victory. The attack on the Capitol, fueled by Trump's baseless claims of a stolen election, shook the nation to its core. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of American democracy and the dangers of unchecked political extremism. The guilty verdict, coming just months after the January 6th attack, raised uncomfortable questions about the state of American democracy and the role of political leaders in inciting violence. The verdict, some argued, was a necessary step towards accountability and healing, a way to begin to repair the damage done to American democracy. The nation, it seemed, was on a knife's edge, teetering between hope and despair. The Republican Party found itself grappling with the fallout of the verdict, deeply divided on how to respond. The party, once a bastion of conservatism, was now fractured, torn between those who remained fiercely loyal to Trump and those who believed it was time to move on. The verdict presented a dilemma for Republican leaders. On the one hand, they recognized the seriousness of the charges and the potential damage that continued support for Trump could do to their party's image. On the other hand, they were wary of alienating Trump's loyal base, who remained a potent force in Republican politics. Some Republican lawmakers, breaking ranks with Trump, acknowledged the gravity of the situation and called for unity and a return to civility in American politics. The GOP, it seemed, was at a crossroads, its future uncertain as it navigated the treacherous waters of the post-Trump era. The world watched with a mixture of fascination and concern as the drama unfolded in the United States. The guilty verdict against a former American president was unprecedented, a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy and the dangers of unchecked power. From Europe to Asia, world leaders and commentators weighed in, offering their perspectives on the verdict and its implications for America's standing on the world stage. Some expressed concern about the state of American democracy, noting that the verdict highlighted the deep divisions within American society. Others, however, saw a glimmer of hope in the verdict, viewing it as a sign that American institutions were still strong enough to hold even the most powerful individuals accountable. Despite the guilty verdict, Trump's grip on his base remained as strong as ever. His supporters, many of whom had bought into his claims of a stolen election and a deep state conspiracy against him, refused to believe that he was guilty of any wrongdoing. They saw him as a victim, a martyr who was being persecuted for daring to challenge the status quo. His fiery rhetoric, far from alienating them, only served to solidify their support. They rallied around him, their belief in him unshaken by the verdict. For them, Trump was more than just a politician. He was a symbol of their hopes and frustrations, a voice for those who felt ignored and left behind by the political establishment. As the dust settled on the historic verdict, questions lingered about Trump's legacy and its impact on American politics. His presidency, marked by controversy, division, and a constant assault on democratic norms, had left an indelible mark on the nation. The guilty verdict, a first for a former president, added another layer of complexity to his already complicated legacy. Would he be remembered as a transformative figure who challenged the status quo, or as a demagogue who sowed division and undermined American democracy? His supporters, unwavering in their loyalty, continued to view him as a hero, a champion of the working class who spoke truth to power. Only time would tell how history would judge Donald J. Trump and the tumultuous years of his presidency. The guilty verdict against Donald Trump marked the end of an era in American politics, an era defined by deep divisions, political polarization, and a constant erosion of trust in institutions. Trump's presidency, with its relentless attacks on the media, the judiciary, and anyone who dared to criticize him, had exacerbated these divisions, leaving the nation fractured and uncertain about its future. The verdict, rather than serving as a moment of closure, seemed to underscore the challenges facing American democracy. The question now was whether the nation could heal the wounds of the past and find a way to move forward together. The road ahead would be long and arduous, requiring a collective effort from all Americans, regardless of their political affiliation. It would require a recommitment to the values of democracy, a willingness to listen to opposing viewpoints, and a shared belief in the possibility of a better future. The future of American democracy, it seemed, hung in the balance.